Good afternoon. Day one of the NFL draft in the books. It is Friday, April 25th, about 3:15 in the afternoon. You are listening to and watching the All 32 podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Show brought to you by Prizepicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 when you play 5 Prizepicks. Run your game. Also, Gametime, best prices, best tickets to see any event that you want to see. Appreciate you being with me here today. Will is missing in action. I think he's euphoric over the Jets selecting Armand Membu, the right tackle out of the Jets. But we promised you a show. I'm here to give you a show. We'll be back next week, and we'll give you our winners and losers of the entirety of the 7 rounds of the NFL draft and anything else that caught our eye. But what I want to do today, break down a couple of things that happened over the course of the draft and do it to you in a timely fashion. Don't want to have you listening to my voice drone on for 35, 40 minutes. We'll start with the New England Patriots. A lot of discussion about what could they do, but basically for the last month and change, felt like Will Campbell was the pick, and sure enough, Will Campbell was the pick. The pick was actually for sale. Mike Vrabel said they would have entertained offers when we spoke to him after the pick was made on Thursday night. Said no one really got up there and wanted the pick, and I think there have been calls made earlier in the process about if players fell to that spot, would you be interested in moving? But obviously, those players, Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, they do not fall, although Travis Hunter ends up at a different place than we thought he was going to. So they take Will Campbell. As I wrote, he's the outlier of all outliers, right? And you say, well, he was a great player in the SEC for LSU. There's no denying that. He's also a tremendously high character, high intelligent football player. The Patriots worked him out, a secret visit down to LSU earlier in the week. Mike Vrabel put on the blocking pad because, as he said, he likes to feel the player, and this is something that Vrabel's been doing dating back to his time in Tennessee. I think actually dating back to his time at Ohio State, and then when he was an assistant with the Houston Texans. It's just something about maybe being the former player, like I want to understand where his strength comes and where that leverage comes from. And as Will Campbell told us last night, he did knock Mike Vrabel on his ass. Vrabel first was like, well, who is telling you that this happened? And then he was like, yeah, I probably want to burn that tape. That better not get out. I realized I'm almost 50 years old and, probably shouldn't be doing this for much longer, but I have a feeling knowing Mike Vrabel, he will continue to do so. But when I say outlier of outliers, because when you look at the position, there are certain measurables, and we can quibble over the quarter of an inch and a half an inch, but the NFL has told you for as long as you can remember, as long as they were keeping the measurements, that bare minimum, the tackle had to have 33-inch arms. And maybe Will Campbell, if you believe the pro day numbers at LSU, he has 33. If you believe the combine numbers, which seem to be short for everybody else, just sub. But between that, the wingspan that's just over 77 inches, which again, crazy number for a guy who's 6'6", 319 pounds. And then you want to throw in smaller hands, 9.5-inch hand size. And if you look it up in Mock Draftable, the last 25 years, no player with those measurements or less than those measurements has ever made a Pro Bowl, let alone be all pro. So if you're believing that Will Campbell, based on the tape in the SEC and playing some guys that get drafted in the first round every year, that's going to translate to the NFL, which I think that the Patriots feel like, at least in looking in Mike Vrabel's eyes last night, the little glint in his eyes, like it feels like they believe that, and they're going to give him, as I asked, is he a left tackle? I said, where else would he be? That's what he did. So they're going to start him out there, and we'll see what happens. But the Patriots, there's some confidence there that he is going to be the guy that, I don't know if he can be all pro or Pro Bowl, but solidify that position for them going forward, and they don't have to worry about who he is off the field or what he brings to the locker room because, by all accounts, awesome football character. So now Pats fans, most of them are pretty pumped up because they heard him talk, and he said he would die to protect the team and Drake May, and that got him excited, which I understand completely why that would do it. I just wanted to read from my story. I understand why the Patriots selected Will Campbell with the number 4 pick in the draft. That doesn't mean I agree with the selection this high, but I will say, as I just mentioned, Mike Vrabel had a glint in his eyes that was pretty convincing, and he called him a foundational piece, a 21-year-old that is mature beyond his years. He's a leader. It's true, 2-time captain. He's durable, started all his games at LSU. He's physical. The tape doesn't lie about that. Dependable, accountable, and he said he's a quick study so that when he made mistakes, he corrected those mistakes very quickly. And like he said, look, in this league, if you're dropping back 35, 40 times, and he says, the LSU drop back a ton, you're going to get beat. It happens. You don't want to make your living that way, but they have confidence that Will be a good player for them. And I will say I've heard some people, whether it be the fan base or some people or media types with loud voices, talk about, well, you can't show me when the arm length wasn't an issue. And I'll just tell you that I talked to many people over the course of this process for the last 2.5 months who did say it was an issue. Now, we can quibble about how much of an issue, but 18 pressures last year, and most of them, if you talk to the people that watch the tape and can point me in the right direction, say this is what happened, and this is where length is an issue, would say that that's what it was. And I will say one thing in particular. He oversets a lot because he's trying to protect his left outside shoulder because of the arm. And because you're facing guys coming off the edge who have a crazy get-off time, the first 10-second split is nuts, a lot of these guys. And they also tend to be 34, 35-inch freaks with their arms. So they can get their arms into you. They also get the speed. So he oversets to protect that outside shoulder because if they get it, he's getting spun. And what he does by oversetting is he opens the gate and gets beat across his face. And he has good recovery speed. And you see that come into play, but sometimes, again, forces the quarterback out of the pocket. Just telling you that these are what the conversations were about him leading into it. And this is why I continue to say this would be an incredible outlier, but certainly has the character to maybe be the guy that is the 1% that gets this done. I said I'll mention, we'll save Membu for when Will is with us because I want to get his take. I know, again, if you read his Twitter, he's pretty psyched about it. Thought Tyler Warren or Membu with the pick going to be all along, and sure enough, it is Membu. And the run on tackles did happen early. I don't think anyone thought Kelvin Banks was going 9, especially when there are people who look at Will Campbell and say maybe Kelvin Banks is a guard. Got to talk about the Jaguars, right? Because brand new regime, no more Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke, get out of here. They hire Liam Cohen from Tampa Bay to be their head coach, and 34-year-old James Gladstone to be the GM. Gladstone, coming from the Rams, saw how Les Snead worked the board and did some crazy things during his time there, aggressive things, and he said, we're going to make a big move here. And I think, you sort of get the vibe the last 5 or 6 days leading into the draft that all of a sudden the Mason Graham thing or defense, that wasn't going to happen, that this was going to be an offensive player, and they set their sights on what they believe is the best two-way player, best offensive player, best cornerback, best wide receiver in Travis Hunter. They give up 536, which is their second-round pick, 126, which is in the 4th round, and a 2026 first for a team that didn't make the playoffs last year. For number 2, 104, and 200 with the Cleveland Browns, they select Travis Hunter. Look, Hunter's an awesome player. I talk about Will Campbell and the intangibles. Will Campbell, Travis Hunter, Egbuka, Jalen Walker were the 4 guys that people I talked to across the league, West Coast, East Coast, in the middle of the country, who evaluated these guys, had interviews with them, talked to them, said they're the best guys. They're just there's nothing. They're squeaky clean, and they love football. Football is their passion, and you'll be happy to have these guys on their team. Well, Travis Hunter, maybe the best player in the draft. I think I think we all settled on he's the real true blue chipper in this draft, and he goes to Jacksonville. I wanted to read a quote from Gladstone last night when he was talking about the pick, and it's pretty powerful. He said, there are players that you can target and acquire who alter the trajectory of a game. There are players that you can target and acquire that alter the trajectory of a football team. There are very few, and it's rare to be able to target and prioritize a player who can alter the sport itself. And Travis is someone that we view has the potential to do that. So they will give him an opportunity to play both corner and wide receiver in the league. I believe the report as of last night was they'll start him out heavy in wide receiver rooms and drills because that's the position that he's practiced the least, and work him in defensively. But looks like they're going to give him a chance to play 100 plays a game, 120 plays, whatever it is. And we'll see if his body at 190 or so pounds, it held up in college. Mostly there were some injuries there. We'll see if it can hold up in the National Football League. But I give him credit. They just went in this is our guy. We're going to go get him. And to me, what Gladstone said is true. and there's a massive football impact here. I also think because of the market size and because Jacksonville, like no one in the league really cares about Jacksonville. And I say that from the offices and Park Avenue in New York, fan base. It's just they're not an it team. They had Trevor Lawrence as their number one overall pick and Urban Meyer, and they did their draft announcement on a warship down there, like a aircraft carrier, whatever. And then Urban couldn't coach. Trevor had a terrible year. They had to change over to Doug Peterson, had a little bit of a bump there, and then sort of fell back into irrelevancy. So I think this is not as much about business, but I think business matters here for Jacksonville. They're refurbishing the stadium. They're going to be playing in Orlando or at University of Florida. While they do that, they need a draw. They need to sell some jerseys. Hunter can do that for them. And if Hunter's as good as we think he can be, and even if it's just as a one-way player, especially if that's one way on offense, Hunter, Brian Thomas Jr., and you hope a revived, rejuvenated Trevor Lawrence makes them an interesting team and a dangerous team and a team that will find itself on national TV and in the red zone highlights and on the national networks because people are going to be watching for Travis Hunter. And then if that team starts to win, they'll get more of a bump from that. For those of you listening to the show, we ask you to subscribe to the podcast, the All 32 Pod, like and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. Say that 10 times fast, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Patriots content. Also, make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a show video drops. There was another big trade. Well, there was a couple more trades that I want to get to. The Falcons, who for the second year in a row confused the hell out of me and pretty much anybody who's paying attention. Last year was Michael Penix after they just signed Kirk Cousins to the $100 million contract. They may have hit that, right? Cousins got hurt, didn't look like the same player coming off the Achilles, then hurt his elbow. Penix came in late in the year, showed some signs. He's a terrific thrower of the football. We knew that going into the process. So they may have hit on their quarterback, even though it was a double down on a $100 million investment they made in free agency. Who, by the way, Kirk Cousins is still on that roster right now. At 15, they get a gift, for at least to me. Jalen Walker, I think he's the fourth best player in this draft. He falls to, third actually, because I wouldn't put Cam Ward. I know quarterbacks, but he falls to them at 15. And there is some question because he is a tweener. As he likes to say, he's a hybrid. At 6'1" with shorter arms, 245 pounds. Is he an edge? Is he a linebacker? When I made that pitch for Jalen Walker to people, I think he's a weapon. And I think Raheem Morris, we don't know if he's a good head coach. Jury's still out on that. But he is a good defensive coordinator. He'll have a plan for Jalen Walker. I think Jalen Walker will be an impact player for them, and I think it will happen fairly quickly. But then what happened later in the draft shocked everybody. And it's not only what they gave up to come back into the first round, it's who they targeted to me. So they end up trading this year's 46th pick, which is second round, 242, which is late seventh round, but also gave up next year's first round pick. Again, this is a team that didn't make the playoffs last year, and I don't know if they're a playoff team this year. So they give up next year's first to trade up from 46 to 26, and then they take another edge, James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. We've talked about James Pierce Jr. a lot on this program. He was in August the consensus number one pick in the draft. Did not have that kind of season at Tennessee. People do their digging. Pain in the butt kind of guy. Much like the conversation about Abdul Carter. Just I don't know. He's on his own program. And I would also say the same thing. And I brought this up because it's crazy to me because he was their best player. Or supposed to be their best player. For a second straight year, he only played 35% of the snaps. So they told you he wasn't a full-time player. Now he's got twitch. He's got speed. He sometimes gets confused because he tries to be more of a power rusher than he is. But they trade all that for James Pierce. You got a gift in Walker, but now you may have given up a top 12 or 15-ish pick for James Pierce. And heaven forbid the bottom really falls out and it's a top 7 or 8 pick. I don't know. Terry Fontenot. I'm reminded of Mike Lombardi, who is not my favorite, but he did he did pick on Terry Fontenot quite a bit. He used to call him Super Bowl winning GM Terry Fontenot, Hall of Fame GM Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot had me very, very confused by that selection. And we'll see how it plays out. We'll see what happens to Raheem Morris if he can't make this work, because again, that's a lot to give up. And I just don't know that I see it for that player. We told you off the top of the show, this program brought to you by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Made fantasy sports accessible to all. Pick more or less on 2 players, up to 6 to win up to 1,000 times your money. 100 is nice. 1,000, that's really nice. So again, more or less on a certain stat for 2 and up to 6 players to win your cash. You can use this in pretty much in 30 states. It's available. You can cross sports. You can do baseball. We got going on. We got NHL hockey. Obviously, you have the NBA playoffs. If you think LeBron is going to go into Minnesota and have a 25-point night, check out the numbers. Take more, take less. If you think Luka's going to go crazy, or if Anthony Edwards, who's been kind of sluggish in this series, maybe he pops off. Just combine it all together, and you can win real money with the crew here. Download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 off instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. One more trade to rip up. The Giants move up to take Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss. You had a feeling that one of the Cleveland, the 3, New Orleans, Cleveland, or New York, was going to come back into the first round for one of the quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart. It became pretty obvious, I think, in the last week or so that there's not a lot of love for Shedeur as a player. Not that there's hate, there's just not a lot of love. And I think what you're seeing is that market settling in the right place, which doesn't often happen with quarterbacks. Like, he's a 2nd or 3rd round quarterback, and he's going to get, here it is Friday. He's going to get drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, likely, I assume. I mean, if he slides to the 4th, that's crazy. Then that's real value to me. It might be real value in the 2nd or 3rd. But Brian Daboll leaned on his connections at Ole Miss. Charlie Weiss Jr., Charlie Weiss, of course, the former Patriots offensive coordinator under Belichick, former Notre Dame coach, been around the league quite a bit. His son, the offensive coordinator at Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. Obviously, he's had Jackson Dart for several years now. Joe Judge, former Giants coach, former Patriots assistant, former at one time offensive coach for the Patriots. Remember those good old days? Both those guys gave him rave reviews. I think Dart's a lot like Shedeur. Like, to me, he's a 3rd round quarterback. And if you want to give him the quarterback bump, then okay, 2nd round. This is rich to me. I don't think he's ready to play right away. And I know they signed Russ, and I know they signed Jameis Winston, so they have a little bit of a cushion there. Tommy DeVito too, Cutlets, can't forget Cutlets. But I don't know that this saves Brian Daboll or Joe Shane's job. I still don't think they're a playoff team. I think if everything goes, unless Dart it takes to it like a fish out of water and doesn't need that development time, you're probably not seeing Dart until at least the second half of the season. I don't know. I guess they can sell hope, and if he looks good, hey, let me keep developing the quarterback. I don't really know what the Giants are doing, though, in general. They putting these guys and saying you got to you got to get to the postseason with the roster that they have, with the offensive pieces that they have. Not pieces, the quarterback on the offensive line is questionable. And so you might be looking at a whole new regime next year, but you let this one trade back into the first round to get Jackson Dart. Just wouldn't have done it. Understand it. Why they would do it, I just wouldn't have done it. And I didn't even think it was that rich of a trade. I forgot to write down the what they gave up, but it wasn't. They didn't give up a future first or anything. But it's just, I just don't think he's that kind of player, and certainly not the guy who's going to make an impact right away. And I think that's what they needed. And when they were, denied by Tennessee because they were apparently the most persistent to try to move up to number 1. They didn't like Shedeur. They like Jackson. They weren't picking Dart at 3, though. They take Abdul Carter, which was smart. I know some people, Kayvon Thibodeau. They haven't decided whether they're going to pick up his 5th-year option, or did they? Whether they're going to extend him. I don't think he's a player worth extending, quite frankly. No, they haven't, because he's only been in the league for 3 years. So they've got to decide that. But again, 1 double-digit sack in his 3 seasons, and 6 of the 11 sacks came in 2 games against backup tackles. So his production hasn't been there. They can double down on their rush with Burns, Thibodeau, and Carter this year, and then decide what to do with Thibodeau going forward, whether they want to pick up that option or not. Or we'll have to make that decision this summer, but he'd be a movable piece anyways. All right, what else did I like before we get out of here? I loved Mykel Williams going to San Francisco at 11. I wrote about him in Boston Sports Journal leading up to the draft, about sort of we all have our guys, and he became one of my guys. And when I first watched him 2-3 months ago, I was like, for those in New England, I said he reminded me of a souped up Anthony Jennings. Now, Anthony Jennings is a really good run defender, but provides very little pass rush. And Mykel was dealing with an ankle injury from week 1 on. I think he finished with 5 sacks at Georgia. And you're just like, I'd like to see more pass rush production. Then the more I talked to people about him, and I went back and started to look at some things, and even went back to his tape last year, the more I became convinced that he's a double-digit sack guy, and he's already, to me, an NFL run defender. So that's a hard thing to pass up. It's much like Walker, who went the first overall pick to Jacksonville a couple of years ago, who didn't have the same – he basically had similar stats. Like, he wasn't this big production guy at college. Jacksonville bet on the traits, and he's been a double-digit sack guy the last couple of years. He's a good player. Not a great player, but he's a good player. I think Mykel Williams, opposite, Bosa on the other side, and then coached by that staff and their defensive line coach, whose name is escaping me, Chris Calaccio, I think. Whatever. You know who I'm talking about. That guy. He's really good. They've done an awesome job, for the most part, of developing guys. He's a worker, too, so, like, there was, Javon Kinlaw didn't quite work out for them, but Kinlaw was always hurt and not necessarily known as a worker. Mykel's a worker. Put him in that system, he could take off, and you could see that double-digit sack as soon as this season. One more to get to before we get out of here. Shemar Stewart going to Cincinnati. And the first thing I thought of when they drafted the defensive end out of Texas A&M was, what does this mean for Trey Hendrickson? Because they got Jamar Chase done. They got T. Higgins done. They got Mike Gesicki done, for God's sakes. They still haven't gotten Hendrickson done. And there's definitely bad blood between the two sides. Hendrickson, who doesn't really talk much. He did an interview on McAfee a couple of weeks ago. Was basically insulted by what the team president said. So there's a whole back and forth there. Now, if they're smart, they'll figure it out. Again, I don't love paying a 31-year-old defensive end. It's probably not going to, in the long haul, that's probably not going to be the best thing for you. But in the short term, with the team that they've assembled, figure it out. Just figure it out. And if the second year of that contract that's guaranteed isn't as great, that's just something you have to live with in the league if you're trying to win now, which they should be with the way their roster is constructed. But Stewart, opposite Trey Hendrickson, and Stewart learning under Trey Hendrickson, I think would be awesome for this football team. Don't forget, Sam Hubbard retired to injuries, stepped away from the game, not even 30 yet. Stewart gives them a presence on the opposite side who didn't get the quarterback sacks, 4.5 sacks over 3 years at A&M, but led the team in pressures, especially this past year. He's just got to figure out how to finish. Trey Hendrickson knows how to finish, so maybe those two can meet at the quarterback quite a bit and give that new Al Golden defense, now that Lou's gone, sweet Lou Anarumo. Maybe that gives that defense a little bit more punch. What's to read about Game Time? You want to go see anything? Major League Baseball, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, college baseball, like pick a sport, concerts, whatever. Just use Game Time. Game Time's picks filters through the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. I will be going to a Celtics playoff game. Probably not this round because we got to get through the draft, but probably in the next round. And I know that I will be using Game Time to get it done. I mention this every time because I think it's an awesome feature. It actually shows you the panoramic view from the seat that you're choosing. So you can see where you're sitting. You're not some weird part of the court or like this, not some pole that's right over here that's going to block your periphery. Whatever it is, you might be, hey, right behind me is the beer stand or the hot dog stand. Like, it's all there. You can figure it out. All in pricing so that when you commit to it, they don't throw on more fees that you didn't realize. And you're like, wait, I thought I was only paying 120 for these tickets. Now I'm paying 165. What the hell happened? Well, they don't do that to you. You know what it is. It's up front. And your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And generally, they are not very flexible. Gametime is. So download the Gametime app, create the account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. I said that was going to be my last thing, but I did have one other thought that I wanted to run, was the two tackles getting picked at the very end of the first round. Josh Connolly to the Washington Commanders, Josh Simmons to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, Andy Reid runs hard camp, but it's a loose program. You know that they've taken guys with, some questionable things in their past. Simmons isn't that, but he doesn't love to practice. He's different, like he's one of the, I don't know if it's the NIL thing, if it's the age thing. I don't want to be the old guy, but like this sort of thing is happening. And so there's that part of it. Obviously, the patellar tendon injury, which happened in October, non-contact. That's a tough injury to come back from. So they've got to feel good about the medicals to take the chance on Simmons at 32. He would have been a top 15, maybe a top 10, possibly a top 5 pick if the season, had he stayed healthy and the season was going the way it was. So if he gets back to his full self or something close to it, that's a hell of a pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, who obviously, once again, looking to make sure that what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, just like it did a few years ago when they lost to Tampa, they went all in on the offensive line. They're trying to do that again this year with Josh Simmons. Josh Connolly, one of my favorite prospects, probably my favorite left tackle prospect. He's a little light, a little light in the pants. Got to put on a little bit more lower half weight. But I think a year in a training program, an NFL training program, where that's your only job, I think he'll be able to do some of that. I love his feet. I think he moves really well. He's another guy you could say he might end up at guard, but I think they're going to try him at tackle. I think he's got the movement skills to be a good tackle for them. And another team with an important piece, Jaden Daniels behind him, they're saying, we're going to protect him. They traded for Laramie Tunsil. Now they bring in Josh Connolly. So maybe it's a redshirt year for Connolly. As I said, maybe he gets some work at guard. We'll see what happens there. But I like that pick. It's a smart pick by Adam Peters, the general manager there, as they continue to make sure that their franchise is protected. Just like the Patriots finally said, all right, enough of what we did last year, dicking around with the offensive line. This year, we're going to go in. He may have shorter arms and the measurables and whatnot, but like we need somebody, and we think this guy can be the guy. So that is going to do it for this edition of the All 32 Pod. Thank you for being with me today as I fly solo. We'll be back next week. We'll start you off with winners and losers. Sort of got a little hint about what I'm going to do, but we'll combine it all. You're going to get all 7 rounds, and who knows? We had some guys that we talked about earlier in the podcast a couple weeks ago about our guys or guys that we liked sort of that weren't going to be first or second round picks. And we'll see where those guys surface. And it'll be interesting. I think this day in particular, Friday, rounds 2 and 3. This is where you make your money, people. The guys in football, like you don't want to miss on the first round picks, but you can find some real good starters, especially in this draft, in this area. So Patriots have 3 picks. The Jets have a couple. Like it's get the job done here and solidify your team and continue to build on a foundation going forward. Once again, thank you for listening. Again, remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. Tell your friends. I appreciate you much. We will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend, and I hope your team does what you want them to do.